This video is brought to you by Shudder. Use the code NOCTURNAL for 30 days free. So last month was the passing of Pride Month, which is a celebration of the achievements in queer rights and a remembrance of how far we have yet to go in the fight for equality. I use the word we because, yes queen, your girl is queer AF. It's during this time that we reflect on hard-fought battles, but also losses. June is the anniversary of the Stonewall riots, as well as the Pulse nightclub shootings. It's hard to know how many people we've lost to homophobic violence and apathy. Apathy, like Reagan's complete negligence to help people dying miserable and slow death during the AIDS crisis, or the current president's inability to do anything for the trans women who have been murdered. It's impossible to know how many people were killed after being discovered for being who they are, and it was never documented before their passing. But one of the most important events that has happened in a post-Stonewall world was the tragic burning of the Upstairs Lounge in New Orleans, Louisiana, on Sunday, June 24, 1973. The lives we lost and the names we never speak deserve respect in death. The Metropolitan Community Church was America's first gay church. Founded in LA in 1968, a year before the Stonewall riots. The mission of the church was to stand up for the rights of minorities, with a focus on people in the LGBTQ community. On the day in question, Sunday, June 24, 1973, it was the last day of Pride weekend, and the MCC was holding a free dinner for 125 patrons. The church had been holding regular service and meetings in the Upstairs Lounge's theater for a while at that time. When the fire broke out, about 60 people were inside, listening to pianist David Gary perform and talking about a future MCC fundraiser for a local children's hospital. I want to reiterate this. These people were attending a church service. They were discussing how to raise money to help sick and invalid children. I want you to remember this fact when we go into how they were treated after the fire. Stonewall happened in 1969, which kicked off a huge wave of social justice demands for queer, and I will be using the term queer as a catch-all for people in the LGBTQIA+ community. I apologize if you find the word problematic, but it serves best for conversation. But change was not immediate. I think we forget how long and hard the fight for equality is, and that it's nowhere near being over. Sodomy laws are still on the books in the United States today, in 2019. You still don't have full protections from being fired for being gay, being kicked out of your housing, or being denied health services. Trans women, particularly trans women of color, are killed at alarmingly high rates with virtually no protections from the law. In 1970, it was even more severe. Being outed meant the loss of everything: your job, your family, your military career. Some of these men had families and lived lives very, very deep in the closet. The club was located on the second floor of a 3-story building. The way in or out of the club was a staircase that connected to the street. To protect the patrons' anonymity, a doorman would answer after a buzzer was rung and would only allow people who were known members or who could be vouched for by other members. The location of the club meant there were only 2 ways of escape, up or down. Either down the staircase to the street or up to the 3rd floor and across to the next building. At 7:56 p.m., the buzzer rang. Buddy Rasmussen, an Air Force veteran, asked Luther Boggs to answer the door, thinking it was a taxi for someone in the club. Boggs found the staircase engulfed in flames. Rasmussen then led 20-some people up to the 3rd floor roof exit, and somehow in the chaotic rush, the door was accidentally locked behind them. The rest of the people were trapped, and the stairs leading down were nothing but ceiling-high flames and smoke, rapidly climbing its way up to the club, incinerating everyone inside, or choking the air they breathed with red-hot smoke. Some tried to squeeze their way through the 14th-inch bars on the windows. One man managed to get through the window, while still on fire, but instantly fell to his death. MCC pastor George Mitchell managed to get out, but turned back to the building when he realized he couldn't find his boyfriend, Louis Broussard. Together, they perished in the fire. Their bodies were found clinging to each other. Reverend Bill Larson tried to escape through the bars. He tried to push an air conditioning unit out of the window, but the plane of glass came down on him, trapping him. He'd only made it halfway out the window. His body was left hanging in the window for hours. People could hear his final screams of horror as he was burned alive for onlookers and survivors to see below. Firefighters were only 2 blocks away, but were blocked by the traffic of the French Quarter. One truck attempted to drive along the sidewalk to get there and collided with a car. When they finally did arrive, people were still escaping. Totally, the fire lasted for 16 minutes. 28 people died, 1 en route to the hospital. 18 suffered burns and injuries, of whom 3 would later succumb from. The complete lack of a thorough investigation has long been the criticism of the New Orleans police, something even to this day police deny. They knew the club was a place for gay people, and it would be silly to think that in 1963 that didn't influence the investigation. Many survivors were afraid to talk to the police for fear of homophobic retaliation. The chief of detectives said that identifying the dead would be difficult because many patrons carried no ID or false ID to protect themselves and, quote, some thieves hung out there, and you know this was a queer bar, unquote. The news had already begun printing the names of some of the survivors. One man, a teacher, who was lying in a burn unit, got a call from his school saying they had heard he was one of the men involved in the nightclub burning and that he had been let go. He turned to a visiting priest from the MCC to ask him to help him find a new job. He died the next day. Some that survived and were not outed by the press had to return to work the next day, maintaining their anonymity, preserving their life in the closet, and live like nothing had ever happened. I can't imagine seeing and hearing the smell, my friends burning alive all around me, and then just wake up next morning and act like nothing had happened. You know, homophobia is actually real bullshit. There was much evidence to support that the main suspect, Roger Dale Nunez, was the arsonist. Nunez was a local prostitute and known troublemaker. He had arrived at the club earlier in the evening with a young associate and began harassing patrons. He was kicked out of the club for starting a fight. This was witnessed by many people, including his threats to, quote, burn the club down. When investigated by police, they determined that he, quote, did not appear nervous, and the witness who put him at the scene of the crime was, quote, stressed, and was thereby deemed a liar. After his arrest, Nunez escaped psychiatric custody and was never interviewed or arrested by the police again, despite the fact that he made public and frequent visits to the French Quarter. A friend of Nunez told investigators that he confessed to setting the fire at least 4 times. He told his friend that he went to the local Walgreens, bought Ronsonol lighter fluid, and squirted it along the stairs and tossed a match. Nunez told his friend he didn't know it was going to turn into such a huge fire. In November 1974, Nunez took his own life. The investigation lasted all of 2 months. At the end, a 64-page report issued in August, the department concluded, quote, although there is speculation of arson, as of the writing of this report, there is no physical evidence to indicate anything other than it being a fire of undetermined origin, unquote. The coroner classified all 32 deaths as, quote, accidental fire fatalities. The media coverage either completely omitted the victims were gay or just didn't report on the fire at all. Just months earlier, 2 less deadly fires in New Orleans received much more attention. In both cases, Mayor Moon Landrieu and Governor Edwin Edwards issued statements of condolence. Philip Hannon, the city's Catholic archbishop, offered his support. After the upstairs fire, Hannon was silent. Neither the mayor or the governor made statements, and public officials limited their statements to call for improving the fire code. The jokes began immediately. Reverend Troy Perry, founder of the MCC, flew in the morning after the fire and remembers a radio host asking on air, Quote, "What do we bury them in?" The punchline, fruit jars. Most churches refuse to carry out funerary services. Many churches refuse to hold funerals for the dead. Reverend William P. Richardson of St. George's Episcopal Church agreed to hold a small prayer service for the victims on June 25th. Approximately 80 people attended the event. The next day, Iverson B. Noland, the Episcopal Bishop of New Orleans, rebuked Richardson for hosting the service. Noland received more than 100 complaints from parishioners concerning the service, and Richardson's mailbox was filled with hate mail. On July 1st, 2 additional services were held and mourners exited through the church's main door instead of the side exit. The day of the service, Perry promised mourners that their identities would be safe. He would not allow cameras inside the church. Midway through the final hymn, someone alerted him that television crews had set up outside. He offered mourners the chance to leave through the rear door to escape notice, but no one accepted. Then, as the Times Picayune reported, quote, "The mourners sang the last verse of the hymn over again, and, with the existence of press cameras outside the church still in doubt, they all filed out. None was seen leaving through the rear." 3 men were unidentified in the aftermath and were buried with a man named Fenris LeBlanc in a mass grave. LeBlanc's family wouldn't find out that he had died in the fire until a documentary crew had informed them in 2015. In 2013, noting the 40th anniversary of the fire, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of New Orleans, Gregory Michael Amond, issued a statement of regret that his predecessor, Archbishop Philip Haynen, and the local church leadership ignored the arson attack. Amond wrote to Time magazine that, quote, "In retrospect, if we did not release a statement, we should have to be in solidarity with the victims and their families. The church does not condone violence and hatred. If we did not extend our care and condolences, I deeply apologize." On June 12, 2016, a man killed 49 people and wounded 53 others in a mass shooting inside the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida. This terrible tragedy replaced the Upstairs Lounge as the largest attack on queer life in the U.S.